ترشيحي لرئاسة المجلس البلدي لمدينة بيروت.
Good afternoon, you're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's top stories. Former Prime Minister Saad Hariri meets with Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu in Turkey and expresses grave concern over the latest developments in Syria. The Syrian government carried out more than a dozen fresh airstrikes in Aleppo. Sources say the death toll from more than a week of escalating violence continues to soar. And in Iraq, thousands of protesters break into Baghdad's heavily fortified Green Zone and rampage to parliament as lawmakers once again fail to approve new cabinet ministers. Former Prime Minister Saad Hariri has expressed grave concern over the latest developments in Syria, blasting the international community for failing to end the conflict in the neighboring country. After talks with Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu on the second day of his official visit to Turkey, Hariri said President Bashar al-Assad was not committing to his pledges and was conducting terror acts in Syria, mainly in Aleppo. The meeting between Hariri and Davutoglu reportedly tackled on the situation in Lebanon and the region. Talks mainly focused on matters that had been discussed during Hariri's lengthy meeting with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Istanbul the day before. Hariri also lambasted Iran's role in the region in remarks to reporters after meeting with Erdogan, saying its negative interference in the affairs of regional states is preventing the establishment of good ties with Tehran. The eldest brother of Interior Minister Nuhad al-Mashnouk has passed away after falling from the balcony of his apartment. 60-year-old Ziad Saleh Mashnouk fell off the third-floor balcony of his apartment in Beirut's Ras al-Naba neighborhood. The body was transferred to the American University Beirut Medical Center in Hamra. A security source said the victim suffered from diabetes and high blood pressure, ruling out a possible suicide. Sidon Mayor Mohammed Saudi has inspected a park that's been vandalized a day earlier, accusing what he deemed as weak-minded offenders of being behind the incident. The public garden, which holds the name of the mayor and which now replaces a previous dump site, was vandalized overnight. Unidentified vandals wrecked lining poles, trashed the garden and broke irrigation pipes. Saudi pointed out that the park was an environmentally friendly venue and revealed that the municipality of Sidon filed a complaint against an unknown perpetrator for rapid investigations into the incident. Police investigators were also on the ground collecting evidence. Saudi also said a committee will be formed to guard the park and surveillance cameras will be installed. The Syrian government has carried out more than a dozen fresh airstrikes in Aleppo. As local sources say, the death toll from more than a week of escalating violence continues to soar. The strike hit residential neighborhoods across the opposition-controlled eastern part of the city this morning, though no immediate information about the number of deaths and injuries was available. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights estimates that at least 244 civilians, including 43 children and 27 women, were killed since violence between government and rebel groups flared on April 22nd. Government forces carried out airstrikes in the eastern part of the city last night, while rebels fired mortars into residential areas into the western government-controlled side. Coming up next, German police arrest 400 protesters at a rally against the Alternative for Germany political party Congress. Stay tuned. Israeli police deployed hundreds of officers in Jerusalem's Old City as Christian worshippers from the Orthodox denominations eagerly waited for the Holy Fire ceremony to commence at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The church is believed to have been built where Jesus Christ was crucified, buried, and resurrected. Security was also present in the church courtyard as local Christians and pilgrims from around the world arrived for the annual ceremony. Each year on the day before Orthodox Easter Sunday, the ceremony marks a miracle. After a procession around the church, all the lights inside are extinguished before the entrance of the Greek Orthodox Patriarch, who carries a handful of candles. When the patriarch emerges, the candles are believed to be lit by a miraculous flame, which is then used to light the candles of the congregation. Thousands of protesters broke into Baghdad's heavily fortified green zone and rampaged to parliament after lawmakers again failed to approve a new cabinet ministers. An AFP reporter said thousands of angry protesters moved into the restricted area which houses the country's key government institutions, and some began ransacking the parliament building. A protest held outside the green zone escalated after parliament again failed to reach a quorum and approve new ministers to replace the current government of party-affiliated ministers. The unrest kicked off minutes after cleric Muqtada Sadr wrapped a news conference in the holy Shiite city of Najaf, during which he condemned the political deadlock but did not order supporters to enter the green zone. Reformist and moderate Iranian politicians allied with President Hassan Rouhani have won the most seats in the second round of parliamentary elections. Of the 68 legislative seats being contested on Friday, 33 went to the pro-Rouhani list of Hope Coalition and 21 to Conservatives. That would give reformists 128 seats in the new 290-member parliament, 18 shy of a majority, but more than their rivals' 124 MPs. Remaining seats went to independents, who could hold the balance the power. The outcome, if confirmed officially, would represent a dramatic realignment in the country, with Conservative MPs likely being outnumbered by their rivals for the first time since 2004. British Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond said he saw no immediate threat to Europe from Islamic State bases in Libya and did not expect the new Libyan government to ask for foreign troops anytime soon. Hammond spent much of the interview discussing his impressions of Cuba as President Raul Castro continues making changes and reforms. He praised Castro for embracing the realities of the modern world after a meeting with a leader that marked a further step in Cuba's thaw with the West. He is the first British Foreign Secretary to set foot on the Caribbean islands since 1959 revolution.
As I said last week, I don't expect the Libyan government to ask for foreign troops either in a combat or in a training role anytime soon. But we and other European partners have made clear that we will support this new government. We will provide capacity building and training as and when they ask for it in the future. I also made clear, and I'll make clear again, that we can never rule out absolutely anything, because our first duty is to protect our citizens. And if we find in the future that there is a real and substantive threat coming from terrorist bases in Libya, Daesh bases established on the coast of Libya, then of course we must reserve the right to take action to protect ourselves, action in self-defense. Raul Castro is seeking to position himself in the middle between those who are resisting change and those who want much faster, more radical change. He's espousing a program of gradual change, embracing the realities of the world we live in. I was very struck by the fact that he described the internet as the reality of our world. He spoke positively about the benefits that the internet can bring. We see Cuba slowly opening up access to the internet. That's something that we should encourage. We should help to facilitate. The government here recognizes that they have underdeveloped skills in areas like financial services. Raul Castro said to me directly, we lack management expertise in banking services. And this is an area where the UK has something very clear to offer, very clear comparative advantage. We're the world's leading financial services provider. So there are opportunities to work together in the interest of both countries, developing trade, investment, and at the same time encouraging the social development of Cuba.
In Germany, riot police have arrested around 400 protesters trying to block access to the Congress of the far-right Alternative for Germany political party known as AfD, as clashes broke out between party members and left-wing activists in the German city of Stuttgart. Heavily armored riot police used pepper spray to hold off protesters, many dressed in black and masking their faces, as officers escorted AfD members into the Congress Hall. Clashes erupted between left-wing activists and AfD delegates, while demonstrators burned tires and threw firecrackers at journalists and police. No serious injuries were reported as a result of the clashes, and the conference began as planned this morning despite the protests and arrests. Moving on to Kenya, rescue workers raced to save more residents from the rubble of a 6-story building in Nairobi after it collapsed overnight following heavy rain. 10 people were confirmed dead. Heavier than usual rains have led to building collapses in the past in poor neighborhoods of the Kenyan capital, which residents have blamed on shoddy or illegal construction. Police said more than 120 people had been taken to hospital. Buenos Aires' nightclubs have been ordered by a judge to close down in response to the drug-related deaths of 5 people at a music festival in the Argentinian city. The Argentinian's capital's iconic tango, milongas and dance get-togethers held at cultural centers are exempt from the ruling by municipal judge Roberto Andres Gallardo, which otherwise calls for an end to all commercial activity involving dancing with live or recorded music. Nightclub owners say they will not follow the ruling, pointing out that the deaths took place at an electronic music festival and events complex, not a typical nightclub. Protests continue in California against U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump, who is moving closer to winning the Republican nomination after a string of victories this week. The billionaire businessman was forced to halt his motorcade and go through a back entrance to a hotel to give a speech to the California Republican Convention and avoid several hundred protesters gathered outside. Protests have become common outside rallies for Trump, who has earned ardent critics as well as support from Republican voters for his rhetoric against illegal immigration. He has accused Mexico of sending drug dealers and rapists across the U.S. border and has promised to build a wall and make Mexico pay for it. The U.S. military says a deadly airstrike on a Doctors Without Borders hospital in Afghanistan last year was a mistake and therefore not a war crime. General Joseph Votel presented the results of an internal investigation into the October 3 incident in the northern Afghan city of Kunduz. At least 42 people, including 24 patients, 14 staff and 4 caretakers were killed and 37 others wounded in the airstrike, which destroyed the MSF hospital building and prompted widespread condemnation from human rights groups. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a recap of our top stories. Former Prime Minister Saad Hariri meets with Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu in Turkey and expresses grave concern over the latest developments in Syria. The Syrian government carry out more than a dozen fresh airstrikes in Aleppo. Sources say the death toll from more than a week of escalating violence continues to soar. And in Iraq, thousands of protesters break into Baghdad's heavily fortified green zone and rampage to parliament as lawmakers once again fail to approve new cabinet ministers. Those are your top stories for today. I'm Linda Tamim and I wish you all a very nice weekend, and for those celebrating, a very happy Easter.
بترشيحي لرئاسة المجلس البلدي لمدينة بيروت.